talk on religion, ethnicity, and language in South Asia. I'm your host today. My name is Abanti Harun. I'm a faculty of General Education Department at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. Before you start, we need to clarify a few concepts: religion, ethnicity, and South Asia. Religion, we have talked about this concept in another talk, so we are not going to get into the deeper of this concept. But here, for the clarification, we'll take the belief system and rituals to take a very simpler understanding of religion. Ethnicity is a very controversial concept, often which is confused with race. There are many definitions of ethnicity from different perspectives. I'm just quoting one. Thomas Howland Erickson defined ethnicity as an aspect of social relationship between agents who consider themselves as culturally distinctive from members of other groups with whom they have a minimum of regular interaction. There are actually two different approaches of understanding ethnicity. One is called the primordialist approach, which means that ethnicity is understood as an intrinsic and inherent concept for social groups, which consider importance of blood and descent, religion and language, custom and culture, which means that ethnicity is static and which cannot be changed over the period of time. On the other hand, instrumentalist or constructivist approach takes different approach. They take shift from a static to processual approach to the understanding. They consider that ethnicity is a kind of feeling, constructed feeling or sentiment based on social, political, and cultural resources. It is always fluid, flexible, and could be changed depending on particular historical, political, and social context. So, a few things we need to understand about ethnicity: that is a kind of social relationship. A particular group define themselves in relationship to other, and which can be changed over the period of time. So there are two things important: self-ascription and the identification by others, and also which can be changed with different period of time. So we are not getting into that, but also it could be important to remember that ethnicity could also be taken as a source for political mobilization. And at that time, ethnicity could be crystallized or could be redefined. Some people could be incorporated within an ethnic group, or some people could be excluded. So there is no fixed boundaries. However, there are different ethnic boundary markers. Could be language, could be religion, could be territory, could be dress, culture. Usually they refer to common history, common understanding of an ancestor, or common historical experience they had been through. And if we look at the world around, we could see there are different terms used synonymously for ethnicity. For example, Aboriginal group, native group, Upojati, tribe, Jati, Janojati, ethnic groups, Khudro Nigoshti in Bangladesh context, Adivasi, Pahari. And also there are certain derogatory terms, for example, Jungli, Pahari, or savage. And we must remember this: all these terms are never synonymous. They have specific contextual values and historical and political values. Let's take Aboriginal people. Who are the Aboriginal people? Usually the original inhabitants of Australia are referred to as Aboriginal people. Who referred to them as Aboriginal people? Only when the Europeans migrated to Australia, they found these original people and they termed them as Aboriginal people. At the same time, like the people, when Europeans arrived at USA or America, they found the local people and they identified them as native Indian or something else. So similarly, but it doesn't only imply the original people or not. It also has certain political implications. Like, for example, in Bangladesh, there is a huge debate on who are the Adivasis, whether they are the original people or they had migrated from some other place, or they should be derived from some other community, or they should be designated as Upojati. Upo means Khudro, whether they are fully capable of taking the term Jati or nation. Anyways, we are not getting into that, but in general, UN and ILO, they have particular definition from indigenous people, the commonly used term, and they use the term they have certain attributes. These are geographic isolation. Secondly, economy, where their livelihood is based on primitive agriculture, low energy, closed economy, low level of technology, and low levels of literacy and health. And more importantly, who are having a quite harmonious living with nature. That is the definition from UN. And also another boundary markers like language, religion are also there, but that depends. We will get back to that later. And now we will need to take the concept of South Asia. Nowadays, we understand South Asia is the subcontinent, which is synonymously used to certain countries that includes India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka. And you could see that recently Afghanistan is also being incorporated into that. And there is also debate whether Myanmar should also be incorporated into that. And also Maldives are there. So these are political boundaries when we talk about, but if we talk about the cultural boundaries, then you could see the boundaries are not the same. For example, the western part of Pakistan is more closer to Afghanistan's culture. Similarly, the southern part of Bangladesh, southeastern part of Bangladesh, Chittagong Hill Tracts, they have more affinity with some parts of northeastern India and also southeastern India and also Myanmar. So the cultural boundaries and state boundaries are not same. Even historically, if you go through, you could see there are different times and different boundaries were made. Like during the periods of the Palas, there were the different boundaries. During the Mughal period, there are different boundaries. So for our discussion, we'll take South Asia as it is now, but we also need to take into consideration that this is basically a British ascribed term, South Asia. Later on, many other colonialist scholars and colonialist people, they also had adopted the term, which are also being taken by the common people of this country, of this region. So another thing, language. We need to understand the language families. In language, there are different families. Like when some languages, they think that they are deriving from an ancestral language. For example, if you look at or if you hear properly that Bengali and Hindi sound similar because they are the derivant of a common ancestor, which is Sanskrit. Sanskrit is also a derivant from another common ancestor, which is Indo-European or Indo-Aryan language. So there are certain language families in the world. In South Asia, we find certain language families. For example, Indo-Aryan language, Austroasiatic language family, Dravidian language family, Sino-Tibetan language family. Even within these language families, there are several branches. So, in general, the most dominant language family in South Asia is the Indo-Aryan language family. Here we need to understand another thing. Often we use the term linguistic groups to refer to ethnicity. In history, we often refer to people like Aryans, but Aryan is not an ethnic group or a nation. Aryan is basically a linguistic group. Okay, so but often we use the term Aryans. Not even common people like Hitler, when he started his mass execution, he used the term pure Aryans. Actually, he was referring to the people whom he thought that they are the pure nation, but he was actually referring to a linguistic group. So it has certain implications, but we don't have time to get into this. But in general, the dominant linguistic group in South Asia are the Aryans. So which are the Aryan languages? That is started from Bengali, Hindi, Marathi, Bihari, Gujarati. There is no specific language like Bihari, but many languages of Bihar. Gujarati, Marathi, Punjabi, and also Sinhalese. All these are Indo-Aryan languages. And there are also various dialects of all these languages, but we are not getting into this. On the other hand, there are Dravidian languages. The Dravidian languages are completely different language family. Those are the dominant languages of South India and parts of Sri Lanka. Those are Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, and Kannada. And in some parts of Pakistan, there are certain pockets where there are Brahui and other languages are spoken. Those are also Dravid languages. And there are also Sino-Tibetan languages, which we find in the peripheries of South Asia, like the Sino-Tibetan languages of the Marma people, Tripura people of Bangladesh, or the Garos, or the Nepali, many ethnic groups of Nepal or Bhutan, they speak in Sino-Tibetan languages. So you could see there are huge variations. And Austroasiatic, why it is very important? Because it is assumed that Austroasiatic speakers were the early inhabitants of this land. So which are the Austroasiatic languages? The Austroasiatic languages are the Santali, Munda, Orao languages or Kuruk. These are the Austroasiatic languages. Once again, I'm citing an example that often we confuse linguistic group and race or ethnic groups. For example, when we refer to Khasi people of Sylhet region or Meghalaya region, they look like Mongoloid features, which are more common among other Sino-Tibetan speakers like, Marma, Tripura or Garos. But Khasi language is actually an Austroasiatic language like the Santali language. So we should be aware of using the term linguistic groups and race groups or ethnic groups. Anyway, so this is an overview of linguistic groups, and here is a map which you can have a look at, that the immense variation of languages throughout South Asia. Okay, so what about Bangladesh? Apparently, Bangladesh looks like a homogeneous country, that there is not much variation, not too many communities are there. But practically, it's not the case. Even in Bangladesh, although Bengali Muslims and Bengali Hindus are the most dominant groups, but there are also enormous variations among the Bengali, among the population of Bengal. Let's have a look. In Bangladesh, in general, there are two major religions. Islam is the predominant, having 90.4% population. Hinduism, 8.5% population. Buddhism and Christianity are other, contain only 1%. Anyways, but if we look at the linguistic variation, although Bangla is the dominant language, but there are many other language groups. Which are those? If we talk about Indo-Aryan language family, Bangla is there, but there are also other linguistic groups. For example, Chakma language is a different language. It's a dialect of Chittagonian language, some people argue, but this is another Indo-Aryan language. Manipuri language, the language used by the Vishnupriya, is also Indo-Aryan language. Similarly, the Austroasiatic languages are common among some ethnic groups. For example, the Santal, Munda, Orao people, they speak the language and the Khasis, which is Austroasiatic language. But Orao language, there is a controversy. They used to use one language earlier that is called Kuruk. That was Dravidian in their family origin. But now they are using another language which is called Sadri. That is now Indo-Aryan. So you see, there is a shift from even one family to another. It's not only a shift of dialect that happens to language commonly, but it is not. There's a huge shift from one form to another. And also some other people who are not properly identified as a ethnic group. For example, the tea garden laborers. They are the migrants from some parts of India, and their language, most of their languages belong to Dravidian language family. And similarly, and some other people of Bangladesh, if you see that those who are the cleaner, whom we call Methar or Harijan, their language also belong to Dravidian language group. However, and Austroasiatic languages are supposed to be the original language of this land. That is what some people argue. Even some scholars like Dr. Muhammad Shahidullah, they argue that they have immense influence on Bangla language. Bangla language has many specific characteristics taken from this Austroasiatic language group. Anyway, there are also a number of Sino-Tibetan language group speakers in Bangladesh. Who are there? In Chittagong Hill Tracts area, there are many ethnic groups. These people like Marma, Tripura, Kumi, Lushai, Bom, the language they speak is mainly Sino-Tibetan language group, from the Sino-Tibetan language group. And also the Garos or the Manipuri, who are the Meitei people, they also belong to this language group. So we could see that there are many language groups. and different features. If you look at the physical features, there are different physical features, but nowadays it is strictly prohibited, or it's a kind of out of fashion to identify a particular ethnic community with physical features. Like, okay, they look like this, they look like that, their skin color is like that, their hair is curly, so they are belonging to that group. This is a kind of out of fashion. But there is certain importance for, physical features, like physiological features like blood group or DNA, for physiological reason, but not to identify a person with ethnicity. However, in general, in Bangladesh, government identify 48 ethnic groups belonging here. Throughout India, there are many, many ethnic groups, and it depends who will be identified as an ethnic group. Even in India, there is also a debate that who are ethnic groups. They use the term, Upajati, Tafsili Upajati. But in Bangladesh, the government has taken the term Khudra Nigoshti from 2015 onwards to designate these groups of people. So altogether, according to the government estimate, there are 48 ethnic groups in Bangladesh. So who are they? If we divide into particular zones, we could see that there are certain regions. The southeast, that is the Chittagong Hill Tracts region, the northeast, Sylhet and Mymensingh, Greater Mymensingh region, and the northwest, like Dinajpur, Rangpur, Bogora region, and a few parts of southwestern region. There are certain concentrations of the ethnic groups. Here I have given a huge list that which people belong to which ethnic groups and which language groups and what are their religions. In general, like Chakma, they are the largest ethnic group. Chakma and Marma are the Buddhist. They belong to Buddhist religiosity. And for the Chakma language, it is considered to be a form of Indo-Aryan language. But Marma and Tripura language and other languages of Chittagong Hill Tracts are part of the Sino-Tibetan language. Marmas are Buddhist, but the Tripuras are Hindus. And other people, they have developed a different syncretistic tradition. What is that? The Lushai Bom, they are mostly converted to Christianity, but they also continuing some of their local practices. Same applies to the Garos of the Mymensingh region. They're converted to Christianity, but at the same time, they are also continuing their original belief system altogether. So there is no conflict about that. Many of the Santals are also converted to Christianity, but they're also continuing some of the rituals and belief systems together, and also festivals. They're all continuing their festivals. So what are the issues nowadays coming up? One of the important issues that how they should be identified. Why is that identification is important? The identification is important in many aspects. What rights they should be given, what rights they should have, whether they should have rights over land, whether they should have rights over education, in which language they should receive education or not, in their mother language or not. So we could say, if I want to summarize or we want to say it briefly, that the definition of ethnic groups started from actually the colonial period. The Mughal people used to collect taxes or levies from these people, but the idea that they are different, they are inferior was not there. At least we didn't find that kind of documents at that time. But on the other hand, since the British period, they started identifying who are the jatis and who are the upajatis. And this term has been adopted later on. And that was important because of extracting huge resources from this area. And it is also important to note that these are the people, not the mainstream people like the Bengalis or the Assamese or whoever, that these are the people who revolted, who kind of started to revolt against the British colonialism that started from Santal rebellion or the Chakma rebellion or the Manipuri people. They revolted. So they, throughout the colonial period, somehow they resisted the British colonial rule. Although they didn't succeed, but they had proof that they had the courage and they had the guts to fight against any forms of injustice and colonial repression. Now, the other governments like Bangladesh or others like India, different governments have different policies to treat their ethnic groups. Bangladesh government has taken, for long debate, there were many debates, because once Bangladesh was part of Pakistan, and at that time the state policy was quite repressive. As you might know, that the Kaptai Dam was built, and that actually inundated a huge area, around 55,000 acres of land in Chittagong Hill Tracts, and that caused lots of disaster for many people, and also long-term insurgency in that area. So different regimes have different state policies, even in the independent Bangladesh. So in 1997, a peace accord has been signed that was kind of a constructionist and peaceful agreement to bring peace in these areas. But they argue that it is yet to be executed, and most of the things are not yet applied. So it will take a long time to talk about the peace. But in other areas, like in the plain land, for example, the Santals are there, the Orao or Munda people are there. They are also being deprived in many ways. Their lands are being grabbed, they are being deprived of education, they are being treated badly or in a derogatory ways. It would take a long way. The state policies are not yet clear, but the state had identified that there are cultural differences among these groups. So their ethnicity is not identified, but their cultural differentiation has been recognized. So that is a good beginning. Let's see what it happens in the long run. Now we need to think about what could be the role. First of all, we need to identify that homogeneity is good, but heterogeneity of a nation is even more better. When you think about the big countries of the world, for example, India, China, or USA, these are countries full of different nations and different cultures that made a colorful mosaic and vibrant culture of all countries. So cultural capital and cultural resources could be a good way to develop the country. Here, the community leaders as well as the religious leaders could play an important role. What that role is? To exist or to coexist in peace with each other. That could be a very good beginning, and that could be led by the community leaders. In many ethnic groups, the community leader is also the cultural leader and also the religious leader. So they could bind the community harmony and community motivation together to lead towards a peaceful procedure. And finally, I would like to tell you that please to remember, all of us are somehow part of ethnic groups. We are Bengali ethnic groups, but it is not fixed. Like in Bangladesh, we say that, okay, we are Bengali nation, but think about the Bengalis of West Bengal. For India, they are another ethnic group. So now if we meet a West Bengali and a Bangladeshi Bengali in USA, then what identity we will take? We'll take, oh, okay, we are Bengali. There we assimilate. On the other hand, the US people, they will identify us as, oh, these are Asian people. So, you know, the boundaries are not fixed. Rather, we should work together to uphold our cultural diversity, our cultural vibrations, to make a colorful, beautiful world to live in peace and harmony. Thank you.